Hello, welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, hosted by me, Jack Perks. Professionally, I'm a wildlife cameraman, but I dabble in podcasting, and each Tuesday we release an episode as I have a chat with scientists, artists, filmmakers, and passionate people all about nature in a light-hearted and certainly not serious way. Hello and welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast. I'm your host, Jack Perks. Now, there's a reason I'm releasing this podcast today. Now, if you're a regular listener, you'll be wondering why have I released this episode early? Well, there's two reasons. Because we are coming back in April for a full season. However, I recorded this episode with Dave Sexton, and he is an expert on white-tailed eagles and their reintroduction to Britain, which happened 50 years ago. So 2025, it's the 50th anniversary of having a successful reintroduction. Because I was going to release this episode next year, that would then mean 51 years, and that's not what they're celebrating. So I'm having to release this one early, which is absolutely fine. I've already recorded loads of episodes for the podcast, so it doesn't matter if I release one early. I had an absolutely brilliant time talking to Dave. He's a fountain of knowledge, and we got to get into about where they got the eagles from, the challenges that they face reintroducing these sea eagles. It was brilliant. The other reason that I'm releasing this episode early is because some of you, if you've already donated to the podcast, will have seen that I am trying to raise some funds. One of the things that I want to do next year is I want to go and record more in-person interviews. I love being with the person I'm interviewing. You just get such a better chat. You get to see things with that person and have an experience. Now, to do this, it means that I have to travel. There are 3 guests that I want to get on the podcast. They've all actually already been on, but they are the 3 most popular guests that we've had on the podcast. I was debating whether to say who they are, but I might as well tell you because that might help you cough up some dough. But essentially, I'd like to get Jeremy Wade back on, who is the host of Rivers Monsters, and I was going to go for a walk with him along his local river. I think it'd be amazing to chat all things rivers with Jeremy. I'd love to get Fergal Sharkey back on the podcast, again, walking along his local river. Fergal Sharkey is actually the lead singer of the Undertones, the rock band Teenage Kicks, and all that, but he's also massively into rivers and protecting them, and I would love to meet Fergal on his local river, talk all about that. And thirdly would be Chris Yates, who is a kind of god among classic angling, and we're going to go looking for hen harriers with him. So they're the 3 that I'd like to do. However, all 3 of those people don't live particularly close to me. So in order to do that, I need to raise some funds. So if you enjoy this podcast, if you've enjoyed previous podcasts, maybe you've never donated this podcast before, I'm asking you, I don't want to say begging because that sounds a bit too desperate, but if you can donate a £5, that's all I'm asking, £5. It's the price of a pint or a coffee. If you can donate that, it really helps me out. I'm trying to raise £1,000 to do those 3 podcasts and a few others. At the minute, I'm 8%, so I'm a way off yet. So if you can just take a minute, please donate what you can. It is greatly appreciated. So a few people have already done that. I just want to say thank you to Philip Blair. He donated 3 coffees and he put always enjoyed the podcast. And glad that it's and sad. He's put dad. I think he meant sad that it's finishing. I'm dyslexic. I can't comment on that. Looking forward to a great final season. Thanks, Philip. Evan bought 3 coffees, but curious to hear what you're cooking up. I've just revealed it. A couple of anonymous people, Elliot, Laura, and then finally Roman bought 2 coffees. But I appreciate all the work you put into the podcast. So the least I can do is buy you a couple of coffees. I hope you get enough support from other listeners to be able to create the planned interviews for 2026. So yeah, if you can, all I'm asking for is a £5. I understand that, times are tough, but if you want me to make some of these last podcasts that I'm doing that little bit extra special, please donate. All you need to do, there is a link in the description to buymeacoffee.com. If you just follow that, donate what you can, it is greatly appreciated. So if you can do that, I'll be very, very grateful. Let's get on to today's podcast. I'm really looking forward to chatting to Dave. He's an amazing bloke. I was lucky enough to go to Mull last year and see white-tailed eagles, so it was great to reminisce about that with Dave. So here's Dave Sexton as we talk all about white-tailed sea eagles reintroduction. So welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you very much, Jack. It's great to be here.
Do you want to just tell me and the listeners kind of who you are and what you do before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it all?
Yeah, I was the RSPB Mull officer, based here on the Isle of Mull in the Hebrides. from 2003 until August of last year when I retired. But I've carried on doing bits and pieces for the RSPB as a volunteer and as an ambassador, and are still keeping an eye on the white-tailed eagles here.
Fabulous. I went to Mull for the first time last year, and because people have been berating me for years that I should go, because I think because
Yes.
I've been a wildlife cameraman for about 14 years now, and just never got around to doing Mull. And everyone's like, "How have you never been to Mull when you film wildlife for a living?" And I just thought I'm getting bloody fed up of everyone moaning at me. So went to Mull, and it just pissed it down for a week. But it was amazing. It was a lovely
Oh
place.
no.
But it was an amazing.
Oh no.
I still saw hen harrier. I still saw white-tailed eagle, golden eagle. So I still had an amazing
Okay.
time. I was just a bit soggy, that's all.
Yeah, I know. What time of year was that?
August.
Hmm. I know. It can be rough. May is a good time to come. And were you filming or just birding and walking?
Just a group of friends who are all into wildlife. We were just having
Right.
a jolly, really. So just anything was a bonus. So no, I still very much enjoyed it. I got to know what's the pub in Tobermory? Is it Mishnish? Is that the pub? I got to know
The
that pub.
Mishnish?
Yeah, I got to know that
The
pub
oh,
very well.
the Mish, as it's known.
The
Yeah,
Mish.
it's
Okay.
very well known. Great music in the evenings. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one. Now, I'm assuming that people will probably have an idea, but let's just assume people don't know. What is a white-tailed sea eagle?
Well, it's one of our biggest birds of prey in the world. It's the fourth largest eagle that we have soaring over the planet, and it's the largest bird of prey in the UK. Um, they're bigger than golden eagles. The female's wingspan, um, yeah, about up to about 8 feet. What's that? 2.5 meters, something like that. Males are a bit smaller, maybe 20% smaller, so they're very noticeable when you see them together, male and female. And they're mature when they're 5 years old. So they take quite a long time to get there to start breeding. And they're actually more closely related to vultures than they are to the other true eagles, like the golden eagle,
Is that
both in
right?
their habits and a bit in their appearance as well. Yeah, they've got it's very noticeable. They don't have feathers on their legs, a bit like the vultures again, because they're standing around in carcasses and not getting their feathers all matted. So yeah, very different to the golden eagle. Obviously, the two species have evolved alongside each other and managed to coexist. So white-tailed eagles, and they're related to all the other fish eagles, if you like, around the world. Their closest relative is the bald eagle in North America. Then there's the African fish eagle, the white-bellied sea eagle in Australia, and then, of course, the Steller sea eagle, even
But
bigger,
very impressive bird.
in the
Yeah.
Far East of Russia and into Japan. So, yeah, that kind of sums them up a bit, I think.
If I mean, I guess a lot of birdies were looking for the two eagle species. Are they? No, I mean, you said the sea eagles are bigger. Are they noticeably different? Like, can you, if you're looking through your bins, can you confidently tell them apart?
I think you can. Seals are really bulky. You can imagine a griffon vulture or one of these vultures with big, broad, plank-like wings, doing a lot of soaring on very flat wings as they move around. Compared to the golden eagle, which is, I think, sleeker looking, slimmer, um, and also when they glide and soar, their wings are a slight V, a very shallow V. So if you're looking at them from a distance, that's one way to tell a white-tailed eagle from a golden eagle.
So it sounds like the sea eagle is more like a kind of large white van, and the golden eagle is more like a Ferrari.
Yeah, I guess you could put it like that.
Maybe I'm
No,
being unfair to the sea eagle there, but
well, a little bit, I think, perhaps, but that's okay. I know what you mean.
yeah. Because I'm sure someone was telling me that generally the golden eagles come out on. I know they don't generally fight, but the golden eagles typically boss them. Is that rubbish, or is there any? Oh, there is. Okay, yeah, yeah.
No, that's it's pretty spot on. The
Okay,
golden eagle is absolutely dominant, and even though white-tailed eagles are bigger, they're perhaps a little less agile and a little less territorial as well, in my experience. That their golden eagle is fiercely territorial. They're a bit manic.
right.
absolutely patrolling their territory all the time, and if they see an incoming eagle with a golden or white-tail, they see them off. White-tailed eagles generally are just a bit more easygoing. Obviously, if there was an incursion right near a nest, an active nest, they would have a go. But generally, when you see the two together, it's absolutely the whitetail gives way. And in fact, I've seen adult whitetails take absolutely evasive action to get the heck out of the way when a goldie comes steaming in. And if they're on a carcass, like a dead deer or something, if sea eagle is feeding and a goldie comes in, the sea eagle steps back. And of course, that's generalizing, and there's always exceptions, but
Yeah.
that's generally golden eagles are dominant. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I heard that. That's incredible, really, because I was driving. Is it Lochspiel in the south of Mull? Am I saying that right? Spell.
Lochspelvy.
Yeah, I think that's the
Yeah.
one. Everyone goes there for otters generally, but I was driving.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
I was driving along there and I saw what I thought were juvenile sea eagles. So I was a bit like, oh, okay, that's lovely. Took a couple of pictures, and it wasn't until I got home and widened them. I was like, oh bugger, they were golden eagles. I would have spent a bit more time on them, but they were seeing off a white-tailed eagle. That's what kind of because I thought, oh, it must be two juveniles and mum,
Oh,
and it wasn't two juvenile. It was
oh,
two golden
no.
eagles who were getting very upset at
Oldies.
a sea eagle. Yeah, it
That
was
sounds very familiar, and I can pretty much imagine where you were watching that happening as
yeah.
well. I mean, there is a bit of confusion too that crops up because young, immature white-tailed eagles, certainly juveniles that we're just beginning to see now that have just fledged, they're dark brown, chocolate brown, and so people see them sitting around and they think it's a golden eagle.
Yeah.
In fact, it's just a young white-tailed, and they get progressively paler and more mottled as they get up towards 5 years old. Um, the tail starts to change color. Even the eye changes color from dark to pale yellow. And in fact, the Gallic name for the white-tailed eagle is the eagle with the sunlit eye because it's got this beautiful pale yellow eye. And then the other side of things, with a young golden eagle, has got a big load of white on its tail, of course. So
Oh.
people see them flying around and they think it's a white-tailed eagle. So it can be confusing.
It does, yeah, it doesn't sound as straightforward as you would think. So, um, obviously you've done a huge amount of work with them, and for I mean, I'm in my mid-30s now, so I've only ever known sea eagles being back in the UK, but it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have them. So when did we lose? Would you rather say sea eagle or white-tailed eagle? Am I, or does it not matter?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's
Okay.
quicker to say sea eagle, but
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Maybe for the rest of this, I'll say that rather than go. But yeah. So when did we lose sea eagles then?
Oh, yeah. First of all, it's lovely to know that at your age, you've only ever known them back. I think that's just fantastic. And that's whole loads of generations now are going to feel like that. Um, the last known white-tailed eagle, sorry, calling him white-tailed eagle, the last known
You
sea
can
eagle
say what you like.
was
Yeah.
killed in Shetland. Yeah, it was shot in Shetland in 1918, and that was the last known of the original sea eagle population of Britain. Prior to that, from beginning of time, they'd been widespread across the UK. They were a common eagle, very adaptable, living in all sorts of different habitats, from marshes and fens, deciduous woodland, and it's only really we've sort of associate them with this wild west coast, northwest coast of Scotland because that's the last place they were pushed to. The persecution was really relentless into the Victorian era in particular. Um, so yeah, by the time we got to the early 1900s, everyone was after them. Egg collectors were stealing their eggs. Museums were the rarer they got, they wanted specimens and for taxidermy, so they were being killed. Um, and of course, persecution from the game rearing estates, the big Highland estates that was all the fashion at the time in the Victorian era. And any predator really was being exterminated, and we lost osprey and red kite and goshawk and think mammals like pine martens and wildcats were persecuted too. So that's how it all ended up with the last pair nesting on Skye in 1916, and then that last lonely bird in Shetland in 1918. So pretty tragic, terrible, awful, horrendous way we can do something like that to get rid of what was once a very common bird.
And obviously, that wasn't the end of their story because we got them back. So, from a more positive point of view, then how did we get them back? Because as far as I know, there was no recolonization naturally. Like they got a bit of a helping hand, didn't they?
They did. I mean, I think it's likely that even though that last known bird is the last recorded one in 1918, there might have been odd subadults, immatures floating around, but they never met, they never bred again. There were occasional vagrants coming over from the continent into the East Anglia and places like that, for instance, uh, got odd birds coming in, but it was never going to happen. A bit like the ospreys came back naturally because of migration and were passing through Scotland and eventually settled to breed in the 50s. White-tailed eagles really were not migratory. They're pretty stationary, and there was no way that without a lot of help they were going to come back. So there were a couple of little projects that people tried. Just some of these visionary conservationists wanting to have a go. A couple of birds were released in 1959. That didn't work because you just need a lot to
Yeah.
be put out there. I think one of them got caught in a fox trap, and another one was recaught and sent off to a zoo. The next biggest one was on Fair Isle in 1968, which Roy Dennis, who of course has absolutely worked his whole life on this bird, he was on Fair Isle at the time and helped to release again a small number of birds. It was useful, it was a good trial, but it didn't work again because it was just too few. And so finally, thank goodness, Nature Conservancy at the time, which is now Nature Scot, the Scottish Government Wildlife Agency, they put together a case with scientists and other conservationists to say, actually, we can do this properly, and it would be on the Isle of Rum, which they owned. It was a good spot to try it, and they were going to bring in 10 birds a year for the next 10 years from Norway, where the population was really still thriving, and Norwegian authorities were very happy to help. And so one chick would be taken from a brood of two. The adults would just carry on feeding the remaining chick, didn't really notice that one had gone. And so that chick would have been taken over to Inverness RAF Kinloss and flown over by the RAF at the time, and then driven to Mallaig and then on the ferry to Rum. And that's how it all began really in 1975. So yeah, it's the 50th anniversary.
So it's quite forward thinking, really, when you think about it. Because
Yeah.
obviously, like in today's day and age, rewilding's quite trendy, is maybe one way of putting it. But 50 years ago, this was happening and successfully happening as well.
Yeah, it was really pioneering
Yeah.
in terms of reintroduction of an apex predator. Nowadays, it is happening all over the place, but this was a forerunner of some of the big global projects like the California condor, for instance, in the States, and the work they've done with bald eagles as well over there. Yeah, and there were it was a little bit trial and error. Mistakes were probably made in those early days, but what people did know is that you had to get a lot of birds out because there would be natural deaths and I'm afraid still some man-made deaths with persecution. Um, but also that you had to be in it for the long haul. And
Yeah.
here we are 50 years on and we're not done yet.
No, exactly. And what was the reception like? Because obviously there'll be many people who are excited and very welcoming of this, and then I suspect there might be some landowners who were maybe not as keen.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You're never going to get full support for something like this.
No.
Um, and that's one of the lessons that I think has been learned and very successfully now by the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation and Forestry England, who are doing a similar project on the south coast on the Isle of Wight in terms of public consultation. And they spent well over a year doing that, talking to all community groups, interest groups, landowners, farmers, and really ticked all the right boxes in terms of how to do a reintroduction and lessons should be learned from how to do it properly. Back in the 70s, that sort of community consultation probably was not required and did not happen in the same way. So there's still criticism today that people who felt they should have been asked weren't. But now the birds are back, and we're learning to live with them. And they still have issues and their enemies. People, some of the landowning fraternity and some indeed livestock managers blame them for livestock losses, in particular lambs. Um, and there's no doubt eagles, both species, golden and white-tailed, are capable of and will kill some lambs each year. But the scale of the blame that has now been attributed to white-tailed eagles has got out of all proportion, I'm afraid. And they get blamed for an awful lot of things that they are absolutely not responsible for.
Yeah.
So you have to go and explore and look into all these cases, sympathize and empathize with the farmers who feel they've lost their lambs. It's sometimes that they're jumping to the wrong conclusion because they see an eagle feeding on a lamb or they see an eagle carrying a lamb off and automatically assume that that eagle has killed that lamb. But certainly in my experience of 30 plus years of watching them on an almost daily basis, they do an awful lot of what's known as kleptoparasitism, which basically means they steal food off others. You see them doing it with mammals like otters. They follow the otters along the shore and wait for the otter to bring fish in and then grab the fish. They chase gannets and the gannets cough up a mackerel that they've just caught.
Yeah.
But absolutely, time and time again, I witness them zooming in on other predators that have had a go at a lamb, and it could be the corvids or some of the big gulls that will certainly do have a bit of a bash sometimes at newborn lambs. And the eagles are sitting up there watching this going on, and in they come. So they haven't initiated the attack, but they certainly will take advantage of it. But they then get the blame because they're big and bold and they get photographed. And
Yeah.
I think it's just a bit of a miscarriage of justice for them, really, and a misrepresentation of their ecology.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, and that makes complete sense. Because I suppose the thing that a lot of people, when they're trying to reintroduce species, get asked a lot is why bring them back? The question I always say is what's the point? I don't like what's the classic ones. What's the point of wasps? But in this case,
Yeah.
why bring back sea eagles? What was the kind of motivation for it?
In the original motivation would have been simply that the cause for their extinction was purely down to human persecution.
Yeah,
It wasn't that the habitat wasn't suitable or that there wasn't enough prey or anything like that. It was purely that one by one we had killed them all, and it was felt, I think, almost like a moral obligation that we shouldn't have done that, and they have a right to be here. So I think that's really where it started, trying to put right a serious wrong that had been perpetrated on the natural world in the UK.
yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think that if we hadn't intervened, they'd still be here, wouldn't they? So it's nice that we've kind of corrected that. How many seagulls are back in the UK? Do you have a rough idea of how many we have?
Yes, it is a bit of a rough idea now. And as Roy Dennis has said recently, that's almost a sign of success that we don't know exactly how many there are because we can't find them all. That there's at least 200 pairs now in Scotland, and there's now a handful of pairs establishing in the south of England. So that project this year had two successful breeding pairs raising young, which was great, great progress. They've had success in the first sort of few years, really. It took the Scottish population back in the 70s and 80s 10 years to get to that first chick. And a lot of people were beginning to worry that it was never going to work. And it just took longer, I think. But now
Harsher
we've got more
environment, maybe?
experienced birds around. Potentially that, yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I mean, the Isle of Rum, which was chosen, again, in hindsight, I mean, it was great as a location in terms of being owned and managed by Nature Scott. Um, but its prey availability was pretty limited around the coast. There were sort of feral goats and red deer and a few seabirds, but It was only when the eagles started spreading away from Rum and turning up on places like Mull and beyond that finally we got to that first chick. So it's great that the English project is doing so well so quickly, and also very interesting that because all of their chicks that they're released are satellite tagged. They know where those birds are and what they're doing every minute of the day. So as soon as there's an accusation by somebody who says your eagle has attacked my free range livestock of whatever it might be, they can look at their data and say it was nothing to do with the white-tailed eagles, and here's the proof.
Yeah,
And sure enough, the farmer then says that, it's probably a fox. But without that data, very quickly stories of predation on livestock grow and grow and grow. And that's what we didn't have back in 70s and 80s. And
yeah.
those stories did grow and they continue to grow today, I'm afraid.
Because one of the other interesting things with them being satellite tagged is obviously you can see where they go because they almost had like a gap year. They went a fair way from the Isle of Wight, didn't they?
Yeah, it's almost a gap 4 years
Yeah.
because then, they wander far and wide. I think people think when you reintroduce something onto a particular location like an island that they're all going to stay there and they're going to be overrun. But that never happens, and that it didn't happen on Rum, and it's not happening on the Isle of Wight because those youngsters started in 2019 have gone far and wide. One bird ended up in Sweden and has come back down. Other birds have gone across to Europe and have come back to Britain. Others have come to Scotland, and we thought, oh no, they're very sociable eagles, like bald eagles again. And we thought if they find the population here, they're all going to come back and stay. But actually, they haven't. They've just wandered for that first 3 or 4 years, and then have drifted slowly back down to the south coast. Some of them have had favoured wintering areas, like in Yorkshire and places where there's lots of rabbits. They've gone back there winter after winter, but so far it is working absolutely as planned.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but like, how do you kind of get them to come back then? Because obviously they release them on the Isle of Wight and they release them on Rum, and as you say, they just sort of
Hmm.
fly off for a bit. So what's drawing what's drawing them back to these places?
Yeah, it's just that homing instinct. I think that once
Yeah.
they start reaching maturity, they start to drift back.
Okay.
And for a bird to go from the Isle of Wight up to, I think it was around Dover, the shortest crossing across to Europe, and then just working its way up through Europe, through Scandinavia, and ending up in Denmark, being there for a while, obviously meeting and mixing occasionally with other sea eagles, and then at a certain age deciding I need to go home and turn around and came back. And it's just incredible that they find their way and cope with vastly different habitats, almost semi-urban. And I can well imagine as time moves on, a bit like some other European countries, in Britain, we will have them nesting on the outskirts of some of our major cities.
Wouldn't that be special? That'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, they've already been seen flying over London, and yeah, there's all sorts of wetlands and RSPB nature reserves and other agencies have got all sorts of very good looking places that white-tailed eagles would be very happy, certainly hunting and potentially nesting in the future.
I mean, you touched on it earlier. So their historic range would have pretty much been the entirety of the British Isles then, more or less.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a great paper that was in Bird Study a few years ago that my colleague and who was previously the Mull officer here, the late Richard Evans, he did an amazing bit of work looking at all the place names in the UK and particularly in England that related to white-tailed eagles. And the names crop up all over the place. Somerset, Essex, Kent, up through the Midlands, and into the Lake District, and it shows, yeah, they were everywhere, and tolerated and revered in some cases. In parts of Scotland, they're depicted on old Pictish stones. In Orkney, in the tomb of the eagles in the South Ronaldsay, they were actually buried with human bodies when they were put into their tombs, they were buried with white-tailed eagle bones. So they were obviously held in very high esteem. And it's just amazing how that all turned on its head in the Victorian era,
Yeah.
and they started being killed off.
Do you think sea eagles will return to the rest of the UK? Do you think there'll be a case where you're going to start seeing them in places you maybe wouldn't even associate them with now?
Yeah, I think it might need a couple of extra further boosts of birds,
Okay,
and
I was going to ask you that, so that's interesting.
yeah, I think they're certainly looking at alternatives. The Isle of Wight has been very successful, but there's other spots in the UK, and they're looking at Exmoor, for instance, at the moment as a potential future site. Um, uh, the agencies in Wales are looking there as well, around the Severn Estuary, and I think another one in Cumbria is being considered. So all these little satellite sites will help to join this population up.
Yeah,
And I think that's what, again, one of the lessons we've learned. Like I said earlier, you've got to get a lot of birds out there. Because I think in the early days we thought, oh, well, they've released 80 odd birds on rum. That's a lot of birds. But it started out they were just very reliant on a few, literally handful of successful pairs. And if something had happened to one of those adults, it was felt the population was going to start going down again. So they did subsequent releases up here in Wester Ross in the 90s, and then again over in Fife in beginning in 2007 till 2012. Only then really did the population start to climb. So that's a lot of birds have gone out, and there are natural causes. Obviously, birds will die of they just die because they can't hunt enough, or they're young and inexperienced. Others have gone into wind turbines. Others have been hit by trains. So it's horrible, but you've got to expect that, I'm afraid, and you've got to get the birds out there.
it's interesting you say that. Basically, kind of, you need the numbers, a war of attrition in a way, because when I've spoken to other people about reintroductions, I mean, it kind of sounds obvious, but obviously, the more animals you bring back, the greater the success of that animal, hopefully getting established, because there will always be, as you say, natural deaths and declines
Mm.
and whatnot. And I guess just good for genetics as well. You want lots of different birds so they're not all from one lineage, really.
Yeah, very much so. And certainly there was a project in Ireland as well, which has also been very successful. And they all these birds have been taken from different bits of Norway. And I know they've looked at in the for future projects to look at other parts of Europe where they might be able to come from, perhaps from Poland and other areas where the population is doing well. Um, but what we absolutely should do away with, and the birds would all be much better for it, is the illegal persecution of birds of prey in general. But certainly some of our white-tailed eagles, which have left Mull, I'm happy to say there's no persecution here. But as soon as they leave here, there is that risk that and certainly as they head east into those really intensively driven grouse moors, that's where we've lost birds, both through poisoning and shooting. And it's tragic because, the community here, myself and quite a few others, volunteers and so on, they watch the birds all through their breeding season. They get to the chicks. The chicks then fledge about, well, a few weeks ago now. They're around Mull for a few months before they start their famous wandering, and that's when we've lost them. And it's you just know that they're doing well, they're healthy, they're feeding, but if they come down and feed on a poison bait that's been put out, they're very easy. Unfortunately, oh, sorry, that's my song thrush singing. I don't know if you can hear that. It's an RSPB clock that
Oh, no, I can't. But
you can't hear that. Okay, that's
you
good.
probably could have got away with that, David. But never mind.
Okay, that's it's stopped now. People back in the day in the Victorian era, they would come within range of guns. They're quite approachable as a species compared to golden eagles. If it's around a nest, they don't attack you, but they will certainly fly around and call, and that's a keeper or whoever was doing it back then could easily shoot both adults very easily. And if you put out a poison bait, you could get three, four, five birds coming in to feed, and they all die. So they were trying to get rid of golden eagles as well, but thankfully back then, golden eagles are much harder work. They tuck themselves away up in the remotest glens and don't make themselves very obvious near nests, so they just about survived.
Yeah.
But poor old white-tailed eagle, yeah, was relatively easy to get rid of, I'm afraid.
I mean, the tricky thing there is, I mean, I don't know if there is a solution, but like, how do you uh stop persecution? Is it a case of education, or is it maybe a case of just making it not worth the while? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a very hard thing to solve, I guess, but I don't know what the solution is to that.
No, I mean, RSVB has been successful in getting, urging the Scottish government to bring in licensing of the
Yeah.
driven grouse moors in Scotland, which happened in the last year or two, so that if a grouse moor is found to have caused an illegal act of persecution of whatever it might be, that their license to operate will be removed. So there's that. Others talk about outright bans on things like driven grouse shoots. So there's options like that. It's just bizarre that people could still kill a bird of prey like a white-tailed eagle or a golden eagle, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
just for
Yeah.
the sake of shooting, then going on to shoot grouse or pheasants or whatever it might be. And I'm afraid some of even the English releases, they've had birds poisoned in the south of England.
Yeah. Oh no, I
Um,
can believe it.
in recent years and they've been found on or near intensive game bird shooting estates. So it's beyond comprehension, really, that it does still go on, but thankfully, with a lot of support from RSPB members and all the other wildlife trusts and so on, making their voices known to their elected representatives, eventually, bit by bit, we hope it's something that's gone forever.
Well, let's hope so because they are absolutely marvelous birds, and I had a wonderful time seeing them when I was in Mull. Seeing as it is the 50th anniversary, what are the RSPB doing to celebrate this?
Well, the main thing I would guess, I mean, we're doing lots of media and articles and so on, but the main thing, which is, and I've just seen it in the last week or two, is an amazing new film called Return, which has been made by the RSPB. It's just half an hour long, which doesn't seem very long after packing 50 years of that into 30 minutes, but it works actually at that length. People like me would love it to be an hour and a half, but it actually it does work, and the producers, um, Mark Fountain and Percy Dean, were absolutely right to keep it brief and
Short and sweet.
tight. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a lot about the people that helped the project, in particular Roy Dennis, who, as I said earlier, has been in it from the beginning and is still in it and urging and pushing to keep it going. And it's just a lovely reflection on the trials and tribulations of everything that went on, and it's worth seeing. It's on YouTube, and it's called Return. And it introduces new characters too, the next generation, if you like, of people who are going to be caring and looking after these birds. And again, like you, they've only ever known them here, which I think is just the best thing ever.
I'll put a link to it in the description, so if people want to kind of watch that, they can find that nice and easy. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, Davey. I mean, eagles they're an easy sell for me. If this was going to be half an hour talking about warblers, I might have struggled a little bit, but sea eagles, no problem at all. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Well, come on back to Mile one day when the sun's shining, and I'll show you some more.
No, I'd love to. I'd love to. Take care.
Okay, thanks.
That was Dave Sexton. What a lovely bloke. Absolute pleasure chatting to him. So that YouTube film is called Return and it's on YouTube for free. You don't have to pay to watch it. It's about half an hour long. Definitely check it out if you get a chance. It's a great film. This is my last plea. If you can donate to buymeacoffee.com, links in the description. That is just going to help me to go and record some of these podcasts. It means that I can keep independent, so I don't have to worry about advertising. I don't get any money from advertising, really. I don't have sponsorship. So the only way that I can fund this podcast is via you, the listener. It's a listener-funded podcast. So if you have a fiver, that's all I'm asking for. Please donate if you can. It would mean the world to me, and it would mean that I'm able to do 2 or 3 podcasts that I really would like to be able to do. That money would be used on other podcasts as well. It's not £1,000 for 3 podcasts, but they're the 3 that I'm sort of touting to you. There'll be others that money will be used for. So if you can help, greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. I might be able to squeeze in a bonus podcast before Christmas, maybe do a little ranty one. I haven't ranted for a while. This has been the Bearded Tits Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Cheers.